What's up? Happy Saturday. Today I'm continuing to build my website that I started a while ago for professional purposes, but I figured that I would repurpose or I would add an additional purpose to it to make it also a website that is I don't know, that's like my freaking website. So I don't really know what's gonna be on there. Just kidding, I do. Um, So I was looking at there's another YouTuber, his name is Luke Smith, and he just talks about a wide range of things. I think his profession is a linguist. He he works at like universities or some whatever, I don't know, but he's extremely well read. And he has like very strong opinions about things. Um, and he's also well read, so it makes, it makes it all the more convincing, but not necessarily true. After all, opinions have no truth value. I think people forget that sometimes. They forget that opinions have no truth value, right? And truth value is a concept in philosophy, which is like something can either be true or not true. And there are certain statements that do not fall or that don't have this quality of like truth, just, because the way it is. I don't, I took critical thinking a long time ago, but that was probably one of the most important college classes I took was critical thinking and uh nah, not like logic. Logic was mm, basically like math. Like if you take modern logic or if you study logic, it's basically like the great grandfather of math. It's like math's predecessor. And me not being a big math guy, logic was a challenging class. I had to take it twice, but also the first time I took it, I wasn't really taking school seriously, so that also contributed to the reason why I failed Logic 1. Um, but yeah, logic is pretty epic. Critical thinking is more epic. Actually, you can get into these kind of like weird, like crises when you take classes like critical thinking because you start to notice like the societal patterns and just very commonly used lines of thoughts in everyday dialogue. And you're just like, damn, this is like a fallacy. And of course, you don't say that because when you tell people that they've committed a fallacy, um, it's I don't know, like usually you just phrase it differently. You're not like, all right, you've committed this fallacy and then explain to them the whole fallacy. It's more so it's different reading about fallacies and studying them than, interacting with people who make fallacious statements, right? And also especially if you're new to it, like you probably commit like 10 fallacies a day. And also, just interact it just normal stuff, every day-to-day stuff is different than having like a debate or some kind of philosophical argument. um Sometimes people commit fallacies on purpose, right? Like jokes are obviously like jokes aren't even fallacious. They're like just not. I don't really know where I'm going with this. Um, But yeah, I guess I got here because I was talking about Luke Smith and how he's well read. He has a website, and that's kind of what inspired me to make a website. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who talk about why you should have your own website and the reason XYZ. Um, so I knew I needed to make one, and especially now that people are asking about uh like emails or group chats or whatever. It's like, okay, it's probably appropriate now for me to make a website that's not just um it's not just like professional, like here's my resume, here are all my programming projects. Um, here's my experience. Like all of that will also be on display, but it'll be more than that. So I think the way I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna divide it in I'm gonna divide the website in two parts. Where basically there's the main landing page and there's a little button where you can click for like professional stuff. So then, people who are interested in, either hiring my skills in blockchain for, whatever kind of thing they might have, there's a place for those kinds of people who are seeking my services, because when I think about it, when I think about what I do in Web3 and where I'm getting paid from and all this stuff, it basically all falls under the category of like freelance. So, might as well put a website out there and, just let people know. I can basically learn anything given enough time. I mean, obviously that's kind of uh, it's kind of a vague statement, right? Because anybody can do that. Learn stuff given that it's worth it for you to learn stuff, right? Because that's how I got into this in the first place. Like, learning to program is I don't know, probably. I mean, anything at a high level is really hard to learn. Whether you want to be really good at tennis, really good at programming, you want to be a really good artist. So I'm not going to say that um, learning to program is harder than any of those other things, but given no coaching, and also just like in a very rapid time frame, whereas other things people have a passion for it. Am I passionate about programming? It's always like a very difficult question that I ask myself, because it's really fun and rewarding in the same way a video game might be. So my friend's playing Elden Ring right now, so I've been watching him go through the playthroughs, and I've talked to a few of my other programming buddies about Elden Ring, and they all say that it like scratches this like programmer itch of like there's a hard problem, and it's just like you versus, you know, like these Elden Ring bosses are like a representation of the problem. It's like it's huge. Um, it's unknown. It's like spooky, right? Because when you're working on a programming project, as long as you're doing things that are interesting, there should always be things that you're not familiar with, that you don't know about, right? That means that you're in the appropriate area between your like comfort zone and then where it's like too uncomfortable to where you like can't even, fathom the project. You're like, you have to like avert your eyes or else you'll get like freaking, uh, just like really stressed out because you're like, how do I even begin? It's like looking at a one of H.P. Lovecraft's freaking monsters. Your brain just doesn't even know what it's looking at, and it causes you to go insane. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but sometimes that's how I feel looking at certain code bases. So, um, yeah, there's definitely this itch that's scratched when you solve these hard problems. Do I love programming? I mean, it's like, I don't know. I don't really think about that question because ultimately it doesn't really matter that much. I don't want to come to a conclusion where I'm like, yes, actually, I don't like doing this, and then I just stop, and then there's 2 years that essentially are not for nothing, but 2 years I could have spent doing something else maybe. But so it's not the sunk cost fallacy either. It's definitely not that. Obviously, it's funny me saying it's not the sunk cost fallacy, and then, it sounds like I'm trying to cope right now. Ultimately, I don't care. I don't really care. Um, I've, I don't really worry about that question. But, even with like swimming, I always had a love-hate relationship with swimming, and I say I was, a pretty fast swimmer. Um, and I never well, I loved racing. I hated practicing. I hated waking up in the morning, going to swim practice, like dying every single time. There was the main set. That totally sucked. But damn, did I love racing on fucking race day. You're up on the block. like adrenaline's freaking pumping. You got like all the freaking dudes who are like trying to beat you and you're trying to beat them. I mean that was sick. Um and I always said I hated swimming, but I never quit swimming, right? So there must have been something there. So I think programming is probably the same thing. It's like a love-hate type of thing. So um once again, kind of lost my train of thought. This is pretty disorganized, but um I don't know. I didn't really feel like doing this today, but then I started talking, and then I was like, actually, this could be fun. I mean, which is exactly the same freaking thing for like swimming or for programming or whatever. It's like you get up, you start, and you're like, uh, I remember getting up like before morning practice. My alarm would go off at like 4:30, and I would just like stay in bed for like 1 minute and just like gather all my strength and be like, fuck, I have to swim for an hour and a half, and then I have to go to school, and then I have to come back to swim practice and swim that same practice except plus another hour. And so I just like gather up all my strength, and then it would like suck. And obviously the big pivotal moment is like jumping into the pool. People use that analogy for doing hard things, but it's funny because I understand that analogy a lot better than most people, which is it's like 40 degrees out and you're in a little speedo and you jump into a cold pool, and it sucks. Um, so with programming, I think it's probably the same thing. Like I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh fuck, I gotta like solve this problem. But once I'm in it, the hours just start flying by, and before I know it, it's done. It's the end of the day, and I honestly, genuinely feel pretty damn fulfilled. Depending on the day, right? All the days are different. Sometimes I get nowhere and it's just the end of the day and just kind of aggravated. You're like, well, I worked all day today, made zero progress. But, tying back into some things I said in previous videos is that this like sourness with not having finished what you needed to do at the end of the day, despite working all day, this is where the mentality of the hours that you put in are more important than what the final result is. So it's very journey oriented and not result oriented, which I made that point, but I'm going to add something onto that because there's a very, very, very dangerous pitfall here, which is basically what my friend's dad calls just like jerking off. Like you don't want to be, working to work and you're putting hours in and you're accomplishing a goal that, doesn't really matter that much. Or maybe you're achieving your goal in some superfluous way and you're just like, oh my God, I'm so smart for engineering all this, right? And then like, it's basically like jerking off. Like it's not doing anything. So that's the one pitfall with just measuring time put in, right? And I'll probably talk about this later, but if anyone's familiar with the Emacs text editor, I used Emacs for about 6 months, and the last 2 months I spent 2 weeks configuring my Emacs text editor, and there was not it ended up not working. I don't really know eLisp that well. I'm not that smart. Whatever, couldn't figure it out. 2 weeks of configuration. And now I just use VS Code. I'm back to using VS Code. So that was all for nothing. That was horrible. That was a huge, huge waste of time. It's actually insane. But actually it's not a waste of time. I need to stop saying that. I need to keep my dialogue in check. That was not actually a waste of time. I learned a lot about Emacs and I just uh became more well-rounded with text editors. All right, that was not a waste of time. Um all right. So I'm going to go make another video now. This is my 30-day challenge video. I'm going to go make another video showing off the tech stack I'm using to build my website and how I'm building my website. So stay tuned.